This episode is sponsored by Fastly, the application security leader and edge cloud platform behind many top digital experiences. Fastly helps organizations deliver and secure online experiences for their end users through a modern, developer-friendly approach to security. With their next-gen WAF, bot management, and DDoS protections, teams have the tools they need to ensure their applications and APIs perform at their best without sacrificing speed or reliability. Discover how Fastly transforms security into an enabler for digital innovation at securityweekly.com/Fastly. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Security Weekly listeners can save $100 on their RSA 2025 full conference pass. RSA will take place April 28th through May 1st in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, you can visit securityweekly.com/RSAC25 and use the code 5U5SecWeekly. We hope to see you there. All right, and for this interview, Colby DeRodeff joins us today to talk about building a data security strategy. Colby is the CEO and co-founder of Abstract Security. Welcome to the show, Colby.
Thank you. Glad to be here. How are y'all doing today?
Doing great.
It feels like fourth Monday to me, but are we supposed to ask him what his favorite farm animal is? Isn't that what we're doing today?
He didn't get to hear the intro. So
apparently it's International Farm Animal Day. So do you have a favorite farm animal?
Favorite farm animal? I'll have to go with the zebra.
Nice.
I don't know if that's really a farm animal, but maybe.
Maybe somewhere.
Depends on what
somewhere
continent you're in.
That's right. That's right.
Have you ever heard the sound that zebras make?
No.
Oh my God. So zebras sound like car alarms. They go like it's the most bizarre sound in the world. Like you're gonna have to look it up on YouTube because that's my favorite thing about zebras.
Yeah, I should know that since it's my favorite farm animal.
They do not sound like horses. They sound like really weird car alarms.
Nice.
What about you, Katie? Nice. Do you have a favorite farm animal?
I think sheep are really cute. I like pigs too because my dog is not afraid of pigs. My dog is blind. And so she's often afraid of other animals. But for some reason, she really likes pigs. So if we're ever at a farm somewhere, she'll go up and she'll hang out with the pigs, on the other side of the fence. But every other animal she gets worried about. So I'd say it's sheep and pigs.
Nice. Yeah, our dogs always liked our pigs too.
Most pigs have really nice temperaments, unless you meet a bacon pig, like the pigs that we breed for food. The only ones I've encountered are kind of dangerous. But anyway, let's get back on topic here.
Farm Animal Day.
So, Colby, we brought you on to talk about a data security strategy, not farm animals, but maybe we can find some analogies, some metaphors to make as we go along here. But data security strategy, just that term, that's not something I had heard before. And just to kind of lay the foundation here, when we say, or maybe I should say security data strategy, right? Like the order of those terms is important here, because it's a data strategy for somebody who cares about privacy, stuff like that. Maybe they're thinking about company data, but here we're talking about data that security teams need and use, correct?
That's exactly right. Yep. And the order of those terms does matter.
Yeah. I just noticed in my notes here, I had swapped around the terms a couple of times. I was like, those mean different things.
Yep. Absolutely.
So also laying some foundation here, let's talk just briefly about what Abstract does, because I think that'll help for the context of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Abstract is in the security operations space. And we really focus on security data pipelines and allowing customers to shift their detection strategy left or to happen earlier in the life cycle of an event, if you will. Most kind of SIEM solutions, SecOps platforms out there are operating in kind of what I like to call a post-index world, which means they collect data, they write it to disk, they index it, and then they do search-based kind of detection. And that is, if you think about the average adversary breakout time, always, decreasing, the quicker you can detect a threat in your environment, the better, obviously, because in security, we're always operating behind the 8 ball as it is. The last thing you need to do is wait a couple hours for your system to index the data before you can actually, detect a threat that's happening real time.
And in a lot of these interviews that I do, I mentioned, kind of building foundation, talking about things. And I think it's become more and more important. Like something I discovered about a year ago was that at some point people started conflating AV and EDR as the same thing. So a lot of times when I hear a CISO saying, "Oh, we need an EDR," I used to cover endpoint security back when next gen AV was coming out, EDR was first coming out, and they were distinct separate products. When Cylance came out, they only had a next gen AV product, and then I think when SentinelOne came out, they only had an EDR product. So they weren't even direct competitors at that point. And the same thing with a SIM, right? Like when we first put in SIMs, or at least when I first put in a SIM back in 2004, it was for compliance. It was PCI driving us to buy that thing and use that thing. And it was only later on we realized, we can do things like threat hunting. We can detect things. We can set up alerts and detect things in real time. Because early on, a lot of it was setting up reports and things like that, and making sure, I think the PCI requirement is to make sure if you do have an incident that you can kind of put together the pieces. You have it there for DFIR purposes. But fast forward to today, and I think a lot of these use cases have kind of grown apart, and we almost have in a lot of organizations. I think this is one of the things you found putting together this ebook is a lot of organizations have multiple SIMs these days. I mean, they may not call them all SIMs, right? But they're all event storage, query, alert type engine things.
Yeah, serving different use cases. And I think, you said the key word there, which was compliance. And so when SIM started, right, back in like 2000, I was actually there. I was an employee at ArcSight, which was one of the first SIMs out there. And when we started building ArcSight, the use cases were all about threat detection. It was consolidating your intrusion detection logs, your host-based IDS logs, which I don't even think host-based IDS exists anymore, but your firewall logs and your proxy logs, getting them all into one system and being able to do analysis of that data to detect threats. And what happened was compliance came along with like the Enron, scandal and PCI and, breaches started becoming a little more public. Compliance said, you got to collect everything from all systems and you got to store it for like 7 years. Yeah. So all of a sudden, this new player emerged in the market called Splunk. And Splunk was very good at collecting data very quickly and shoving it onto a disk. Now, you couldn't really do much with the data other than
charging you for it.
There's that. Yeah. But, the goal was get it on the disk, store it for a long period of time, make it searchable. And that's really where these two threads kind of started, bifurcating. And you started having this, I like to call it the data swamp and XDR era, because what happened is you end up with this mass amount of data in these quote unquote SIMs like Splunk, which in my personal opinion, Splunk is not a SIM, right? Splunk is a log searching tool. And it has its purposes, but it ultimately becomes this mass amount of data. And so what a lot of entrepreneurs did, including myself, was we went out and built solutions on top of SIM to actually get back to doing the threat detection work, right? To add that threat detection value back because the SIMs just weren't doing that job anymore.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more. I think obviously I'm a little biased in that I spent a couple years talking about security data pipelines, but I think, if you don't keep in mind what the platform you're using was actually built for, then you may lose sight of the fact that if a platform started out as just a data analytics platform and a lot of people started using it for security, that doesn't necessarily mean it was built for security. So things like the low-hanging fruit here to take aim at is geo-IP location. Like if you're doing a data analytics and you're not Googling geo-IP location until query, that's fine. In a SIM, you probably want to know where that IP was when that event happened. And so, yeah, I think there are a lot of places where there are huge telemetry holes because we're not necessarily using tools for what they were built for, even though they do really powerful things. It's just that's not what they were intended for.
Exactly. Sort of your square peg round hole scenarios in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Not to mention the cost.
Yeah, and with alert fatigue and everything, the speed at which you can do some of this stuff, the number of Chrome tabs you have open to do what you're doing, the amount of time you can save with enrichment, like going ahead and gathering that geo-IP data beforehand, so I don't have to have an extra tab open or a MaxMind API connection or something like that to do all that. It really, really matters, which is, I think why SIM failed a lot in the past is they tried to appeal to everything. Like I can't remember once that I could use a canned report out of a SIM, that it was useful to me. Every single time I had to build from scratch.
I hate to say
those
it,
reports they give you when you get your oil changed that say that your brake pads need to be replaced, even though you did it a month ago.
Exactly. And now they're sending them like in advance saying, we think your brake pads might be low. They must have AI generating those for them, which is great. But funny you mentioned like the out of the box reports. Like that actually used to be my job at ArcSight for a number of years, was building default content. No, hey, it's a really hard thing to do, to build things, and then and I remember our field team, the first thing they would do when they got to a customer was delete all the stuff I built. And then they'd go build it all again from scratch. And I'm like, guys, what can I do to make it better? And they're like, well, the challenge is the data's always different. So we love your ideas of what you built, but we have to rebuild it for this specific data. It all comes back to the data, hence the data strategy.
It's a huge challenge for cybersecurity vendors in general, but SIMs in particular. I call it the customization tax. It's not a literal tax unless you're paying for professional services to solve the problem. But it's that customization work that you have to do to get the off-the-shelf product doing what you need it to do, because the vendor doesn't know what your environment looks like. They don't know what your data looks like, what your needs are, right? The stuff that you actually want to build on top of the SIM. So I've always found it useful to think of a SIM as more of a development platform, right? And I think that would manage expectations better. People would be happier, if you set that as the expectation. Sure, you're functionally going to be up and running in one day, but there's going to be some stuff to build.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody bakes those, right? Everybody has competing interests, because sales doesn't want to tell you that in addition to buying this SIM, you're probably going to need hundreds of hours and expensive professional services, or even worse, to get a new headcount approved at your organization because somebody needs to write detections. And
you were just going to say that you need professional help.
Yeah. I mean, everybody tells me that, but
no, I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about the SIM user.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think it's one of those things where 40% of SIM stand-ups don't fail because the SIMs don't work. Some of them don't. Some of them are just trash. But it's because you can't make them work, right? So it's like the reason a lot of businesses fail is not because they're bad ideas. It's because you underestimated how much it takes to execute that good idea. So I don't know. And obviously sales comes in and they tell you that you buy the SIM and it's this one-stop solution and it's going to solve all your problems because it's a platform now, because everybody's a platform. So
absolutely. And it's interesting too, because I mean, you look at how sticky like something like a Splunk is in an environment. Well, that's because of all those hours that have been spent, hours, months, days, years, customizing it.
That you built on top, right?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So think about ripping that out. It's like, oh man, now I got to go rebuild all these reports and widgets that I was relying on. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
So when you think
So
about shifting left in terms of, detections and things like that, like what does that actually look like?
So, my theory is I want to get back to and allow our customers to get back to doing things in near real time. And the industry has shifted so far to the right because of this kind of post-index, environment that most, and I'll say most. I don't want to say every solution out there, but most solutions out there operate in this kind of, index per data source type architecture. Um, it was kind of the way that Splunk originally came out with that, and then you see folks like Elastic and others, kind of following that sort of methodology. A lot of the logging solutions that were purchased by some of the larger security vendors as well operate in that kind of a architecture. And so what happens is you come up with these rules, right? And these rules, these detection rules, are essentially saved searches, right? And so, you collect the data, you send it into the main processing engine. That processing engine writes it into these specific indexes on disk so that it's fast to access the data. And then these searches, these saved searches or rules, run against that data and detect threats, supposedly, right? And the challenge with that is in large implementations of some of these platforms, that indexing process alone could take an hour, it could take 2 hours. I mean, you might be, a day behind in some cases, depending if you don't have enough, squirrels running on the hamster wheel or the squirrel wheel or whatever to index fast enough. And so, my thesis and our thesis at Abstract is, why not shift that detection left where we have the data already flowing through our system? So why not go back to applying like real-time analytics, real-time threat detection to that data stream? And so, that's the technology that we've been building. That's our customers are finding a lot of value in that. And even if they have a SIEM where we're sending data, so we can route data to multiple destinations, right? We have customers that shove some of it into cheap storage in like S3 or other object storage, and then they send some of it to their SIEM, to try to reduce cost of the downstream SIEM that's charging them per terabyte. Um, and that really gets into that data strategy conversation. It's like, what data do you actually need for detection? What data do you need for compliance and reporting? And do you need to send all of the data to your detection engines, which you really don't, because only about like 10% of it's useful for doing detection work. So we can send not only the data to these different places, we can also send the output of our alerting and our detection engine to these locations as well. So if you're operating in an environment where we're your security data pipelines, we're collecting from all your sources, we're routing that data to your destinations. We would also send those alerts into your current existing security workflows, right? So you're just kind of taking the detection work that's happening in the current environment, kind of after index to moving it before index and saving a lot of time in better MTTR, better MTTD, et cetera, et cetera.
So how much of this is, it seems like the folks setting up a SIM are not the folks who understand how attacks work, or the folks writing detections, right? How much of this problem came out of, okay, my job is to set up a SIM. Okay, step one, shove everything in there. Step
Right.
two, figure out what to do with it, right? That's kind of that's how I set up my first SIM.
Yeah.
And immediately regretted it every day since. Is that fundamentally the whole problem? Like when you say security data strategy here, it's kind of flipping the whole thing and saying, okay, what attacks are we worried about? What data do we need to detect those attacks? Now, figure out what data we need to shove in this thing to be able to build those, right? Is
That's
that
right.
what we're saying here?
Yes, but you're spot on of where that problem really originated because, I remember doing lots of SIM deployments when I was at ArcSite, and we would spend the first year of the customers, well, back then there were perpetual licenses and, everything's yearly subscriptions now, but back then it was like you'd buy a 3-year license for something. We'd spend like the first year onboarding all these different data sources. And after like a year or so, the customer would
building
say,
parsers.
Oh man. Yeah. Lots of parsers. Customer would go, well, now I got everything in here. What am I supposed to do with it? Right. And that was always the big question. And in fact, we had to create a team that would go out and visit the customers post like data collection and try to figure out what their actual use cases
Just
were.
a brainstorm.
Yes. Yeah. Because, you don't want it to become shelfware. And so, there were all these capabilities, but to your point earlier, it really is a workbench. It's a platform, like it is a development platform for security, right? And I think you're never going to build it all out of the box.
So yeah, you're talking to a very different buyer, I imagine. Your personas look very different from ArcSight's looked like back in the day when ArcSight was selling a SIEM.
Absolutely. So I think two things changed there. One of them is that, back in the early days of SIEM, the security team always owned the SIEM. Now you find a lot of organizations where IT owns the SIEM and offers it to the security team as a service.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because if we have some of these dual IT security tools, like we mentioned before, where someone already had the license, and it's easier to negotiate a license for 200 terabytes, than 100 and 100, right?
And they built it for root cause analysis, right? For debugging applications, that kind of thing, which is a very different use case.
That's right. And then, I feel bad for the security folks who are sitting there like, hey, we need this capability. We need this data. And they have to go open tickets with the IT team. And the IT team's like, you don't really need that data. So we're seeing a lot of this starting to go back to more of the old way, which is where I think, and our focus is really on security data pipelines, right? Which is not to focus on the broader IT observability, because that's a huge space in and of itself with its own unique requirements. What I want to do is service the security buyer, right? And get them the data that they need in the format that they need it, with the enrichments that they need to have happen, and the detections that we can do along the way. And I'm starting to see a shift.
And this mirrors a lot of conversations I have about asset management. I do a lot of advisory calls on vulnerability management, asset management. And one of those is I'll often start out, I'll talk to companies, we're trying to standardize on ServiceNow, which again, you have that same kind of IT and security fighting over, what the end result should look like. And the first thing I tell them is, look, it's okay for different parts of the company to have their own asset management databases, because you need different things out of them. You need different features, and then we end up talking about Exonius or Jupyter One or, something like that, something cyber focused.
What are you finding with implementation when you have a net new customer? Because you talked about some of the onboarding issues with your legacy SIEMs. We know that finding data is hard in the first place. There are a bunch of different approaches to it. Are you finding today that when it comes to security data, people know what to plug in? Are they still struggling with what the heck do I have? Where is it? And how is it stored?
Yeah, kind of all of the above. I mean, I think, part of it and why we really wanted to we invested a lot of resources into putting out this data strategy ebook, was to really, and this was a community thing. This is not something, we didn't pay any authors for it or anything like that. We went to people that we know in industry and just kind of said, hey, we want to put this project together. Would you be willing to participate? It's totally free. We don't gate the download. It's out there, right? And so we wanted to do that a little differently than how things have been done historically. And part of that was because a lot of folks are still operating in that, I just have to have that data. I have this source. I must have it. Why are you collecting it? Well, I don't know, because we're supposed to. We had it before, just in case.
It was listed
because we're hoarders.
Yeah, I
Right,
clicked on
Cybersecurity
the,
folks are hoarders.
yeah,
Yes.
or
I
like it
have
was
more, so
listed
it's
as a
good.
potential source in an IOC. It's like, here's a log, and you're like, oh, we're not even collecting that. So you decide that
Right.
instead of you need to collect it all the time because you read some random threat report.
Right. Yep. Or you have like two data sources that are basically reporting the same thing. Like you take your, say, I don't know, like a Netscope, and you take like your firewall logs. They both have connection related information in them. And your detection rule is looking for an outbound IP address. And you have two logs that tell you that. It's like, do I need both of those?
Yeah.
Maybe not. But I think
Yeah.
that, really kind of, I'll give you an example from one of the customers that we just kind of launched. They had 44 data sources reporting into their SIEM, and I won't use names here. And they had 8 of those running through their previous pipeline provider, and they couldn't get the other 36 running through that pipeline provider. So we came in. Now all 44 of those data sources are running through our platform, feeding into their SIEM. And one of the things, you always go into these scenarios saying, hey, we want to reduce the data in the SIEM, or that's what the customer's kind of looking for. And in one of the data sources, the amount of data went up. And the customer's like, well, that's not, we're trying to reduce the data. Why is it going up? So we kind of deconstructed the previous integration and figured out that it was actually only capturing like 10% of the data that was in Microsoft Azure. So they basically have been blind to what's been going on in like this Azure environment for like years. And so it was kind of one of those happy, not happy situations. Like they're happy that it was fixed, but they were like,
That's the worst moment when I did a lot of incident response, and that's what I've used SIMs for a lot. And oh man, your stomach just drops out when you go in there, you do a query and nothing comes back. Then you open up the query more, still nothing. You're like, how long have we not been getting these logs? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, and that's
I asked
absent a security data pipeline that does some of the parsing and things like that. It's so easy. If you don't have good observability and you're doing some of this, like the regex and stuff like that manually, it is so easy for that stuff to break, and you just stop collecting syslog. And if it's not a big enough bump in the traffic, it doesn't register. And I've had that happen.
Absolutely. I was asking some CISO friends, like when we were starting to build Abstract a couple of years ago, sort of what are the things that keep you up at night? Where would you go after and solve? And like one of the common threads there was like, the visibility challenge, visibility gaps, right? Especially with like cloud infrastructure.
The stuff you're not seeing.
The stuff you're not seeing, right? Or the stuff that just disappears and you don't know, did it disappear because they took down that cloud infrastructure, or did it disappear because I stopped getting the logs for it, or what actually happened? It's definitely scary. And to your point, it always seems to happen in the environment that you're doing a root cause in, or an IR.
I love this ebook. I always love resources that are easy to use. You've got nice table of contents on the side. You don't even have to download a PDF. You can just browse the table of contents, click and go to it. You can also, there are downloadable versions as well. But I like that. So you've broken it down into a bunch of stages here. You break down the pillars of a data security strategy. And you also have what maturity looks like for each of these different stages too, which I think is really useful.
Yeah, I'm big on maturity models. I think coming from finance, I think that in security, there's like 5,000 frameworks and guidelines and best practices, and but nobody ever says like, this is what this actually looks like when it's done right. It's like, these are all the things, but nobody says like, these are the things that are actually, this is when it's done right. Or this is like average. Because the other thing that vendors do is they come in and they're like, well, this is what perfect looks like. And you're like, I'm never going to achieve that. I just want to know what kind of good enough looks like, good place to start. And when we met a couple months ago, we bitch on the show all the time about how people safeguard information. And the reason that hackers are successful is because they open source everything, they share information, they don't really have a problem sharing data. And when you told me about this when I first met you guys, I was like, this is awesome. This is leading by example. This is, ungated. I don't have to give you my email address to download this thing. Yeah, and I think it's really important because we need to do a lot more of this.
Yeah. Well, big thanks to Oxa Taylor and Justin Borland, for leading the efforts on this. Oxa convinced me, look, I'm old school. I was like, okay, so we're going to gate this, right? Oxa goes, no, I don't want to gate it. It's like, really? And she's like, no, I don't think we should. And, she's the boss. So basically, we didn't gate it. And I agreed. I came around pretty quickly, and I was like, you know what? This is actually the right thing to do. Let's do it this way. And I'm just really proud of the team that put this together. And, it's, I just hope folks are getting value out of it, honestly. It seems to be getting pretty popular. So
we love Oxa. She's awesome.
She is.
Shout out.
Yep. This has been a wonderful conversation. I love just rehashing the old days of SIEM. I mean, it's like, man, if you've been there, you know.
Well, and yeah, I mean, some of those problems still exist, though, right?
They do.
I had no idea, like the idea of IT owning the SIEM. And like giving security access is completely the reverse of what I remember, because I was at a payment processor. And so PCI gave us the budget to buy the SIEM, and I would get co-opted because security was underneath the CTO within the IT organization. I'd get told, hey, you're going to go figure out the root cause of this big outage that we had because you're the person with all the logs, right? You've got all the... you got the system of record of everything that happened. So and I would get pulled off whatever security task to go hunt for stuff. So it's interesting that has reversed, that some things have changed, but and others haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big cycle in security, right? First agents, then no agents, agentless. Now we're back to agents.
Yeah.
It's
we're back to now we have crazy agents that do whatever they want. So that's even better.
And AI agents. Yeah.
And AI agents, yeah. Oh boy.
If you can slip agentic into your marketing materials, you're good.
Oh, sorry, I should have done that. It's an agentic security data strategy.
Log collector. I know, it's like everybody was all worried about agents on their endpoints, and now they're like, I want agentic things. And you know what that means, right?
I mean, I'm at Google Next right now, and I was walking through the expo hall yesterday at Next, and
just
AI everything. AI basketball coach. I mean, kids used to want like a batting cage. Now they're going to want this basketball court with this AI, oh man.
I was looking at a golf simulator a couple days ago, but don't at me. And like one of the talks I submitted for Black Hat this year was around like how to unwind an AI project, because whether you told them not to do it or not, you're going to have to clean it up, and all the shadow like snowflakes instances just hanging out there, all the things you thought that the team who decommissioned it stopped data flowing from and to, like, oh, what a nightmare. I mean, great job security and future vendor opportunity, but shadow IT and data from AI is going to be just ridiculous.
From AI experiments.
Yeah. Well, and like to your point, Colby, did they just delete it? And if they did they just violate data retention laws? What was it? Were we supposed to delete it, or did we have to keep a copy?
Right, exactly. And do you have to keep a copy of what the AI generated and said about that data now?
Yeah.
I don't know. What becomes admissible in court? I don't know.
Oh, I can't wait.
Can you bring your AI to court?
There you go.
How does
I'd like to introduce my counsel.
Under oath?
The judges right now do not like that. Somebody did try that. I read that story the other day. Somebody tried using AI as counsel, and the judge shut it down pretty quick.
They were somewhat lenient.
Yeah, because it wasn't a lawyer that tried to do it. It was just somebody trying to self-represent, trying to use AI legal counsel as their self-representation. But yeah, the judge was not amused.
Yeah.
I'm
I got
sure
horrible legal advice from AI in this whole. I'm being sued by an Airbnb host for a bad review. And when I asked it for I gave it a very detailed state specific, county specific, and it gave me horrible advice. And I was like, it's a good thing that I'm smart enough to double check, because if I had followed the advice, I would have missed a very important deadline and defaulted.
Ouch.
Yeah.
All right, great stuff, Colby.
Yeah.
Thanks again for the resource for the community here. The ebook here is great. We've got that linked in the show notes, so we would urge people to go check that out. Very usable. Like if you're just interested in the data analysis portion, you can just skip there, right? Or the data storage section. So good stuff. Check that out. So yeah, thanks again, Colby, for putting this together and coming on to chat about it.
Absolutely. Look forward to seeing y'all at RSA, I'm sure. And
Yeah.
I'll
be there.
All right.
All right. We'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.